Imagine someone you've trusted for years, someone you always tried to please, suddenly realizing that their control over you is gone. That exact moment, that's the moment everything shifts. Imagine someone you've trusted for years, someone you always tried to please, suddenly realizing that their control over you is gone. That exact moment, that's the moment everything shifts. If you're tired of being manipulated, if you're ready to reclaim your power, pause this video and commit to one boundary today. Write it down, enforce it, and watch how the dynamic changes. Narcissists are like emotional parasites. They don't seek genuine connection, they seek fuel. Your compliance, your willingness to accommodate, your constant attempts to smooth over conflicts or soften their reactions, all of these are the energy they crave. When you consistently act nice, you are unknowingly giving them permission to continue their patterns of manipulation, control, and entitlement. Niceness in this context is not virtue, it is a form of currency, a resource they harvest to feel powerful and validated. Every time you apologize unnecessarily, every time you bend your schedule or priorities to suit their demands, every time you suppress your feelings to avoid conflict, you are feeding them. This is why niceness, in the context of a narcissistic relationship, is dangerous. It sustains their illusion of dominance. They are not interested in mutual respect, in empathy, or in compromise. They are drawn to patterns where others sacrifice their needs for the sake of the narcissist's comfort or ego. When you respond to their provocations with patience or explanations, they interpret it as weakness, not kindness. Your emotional availability becomes a tool they use to manipulate, guilt, or extract attention. Every polite concession, every attempt to maintain peace, is an invitation for them to test boundaries, push limits, and see how far they can stretch your tolerance. The more energy you give, the more they take. The cycle intensifies and the imbalance grows. Over time, it erodes your confidence, drains your motivation, and keeps you tethered to a dynamic that is fundamentally exploitative. The problem is that most people approach narcissists with a default human decency, assuming that niceness will elicit reciprocity or understanding. But narcissists are wired differently. They do not operate on fairness or empathy. Your polite behavior does not encourage them to behave better. It trains them to expect that behavior indefinitely. They learn the rules of the interaction very quickly. Compliance equals control, politeness equals power, and emotional availability equals access. Every kind response teaches them that you are predictable, malleable, and, most importantly, a reliable source of emotional fuel. Understanding this dynamic is crucial because it reframes how you respond. The goal is not to become harsh or cruel. The goal is to stop providing energy that they exploit. Once you recognize that your compliance and politeness are feeding their ego, you can begin to reclaim your power. Boundaries become essential, detachment becomes a tool, and selective engagement becomes a strategy. Instead of being nice in a way that feeds them, you can be measured, deliberate, and firm. Your energy is no longer theirs to take, and for a narcissist, that is the ultimate disruption. The key takeaway is that niceness, when applied to a narcissist, is often a trap disguised as virtue. It is not a reflection of your moral compass, but a mechanism that allows them to thrive at your expense. Recognizing this is the first step in reclaiming control over your own emotional landscape, and it is the foundation upon which all further strategies, boundaries, detachment, assertiveness are built. Many people mistake being nice for being kind, but when it comes to narcissists, the two are worlds apart. Kindness is a conscious choice to uplift, support, or show genuine care without losing yourself in the process. Niceness, on the other hand, is often a mask, a pretense that covers fear, obligation, or the desire to avoid conflict. When you interact with a narcissist under the guise of niceness, you are rarely acting from a place of true generosity. Instead, you are enabling their manipulation. Every compromise you make to keep the peace, every excuse you offer for their behavior, every time you suppress your feelings to avoid confrontation, you are reinforcing the very patterns that allow them to control you. What feels like a moral or polite choice is actually a tool of empowerment for them. Enabling is subtle and insidious. It is not about overtly giving in. It is about creating a dynamic where they learn they can manipulate your reactions. When you constantly explain yourself, justify your actions, or accommodate unreasonable demands, you are teaching them that your boundaries are negotiable and your emotions are malleable. They begin to anticipate your responses, predict your concessions, and exploit your good intentions. Niceness becomes a blueprint for manipulation, a map that shows them exactly how to extract the maximum emotional or psychological gain from you without effort. This is why reframing your approach is essential. Being genuinely kind requires detachment from the narcissist's power games. It requires acting from a place of integrity rather than fear or obligation. True kindness is selective. It uplifts where it can, but it never sacrifices your core needs or self-respect. Niceness, by contrast, is indiscriminate. It is performed for the narcissist's comfort, often at your own expense. The more you operate from niceness rather than kindness, the more you become a participant in their manipulation. You are feeding the very behavior that erodes your confidence, diminishes your autonomy, and sustains the toxic dynamic. Understanding this distinction changes everything. Once you recognize that your nice actions are not neutral or virtuous, but are tools they exploit, you can begin to recalibrate your responses. You no longer operate on their terms. Instead of automatically conceding, you pause, assess, and act strategically. You say no without guilt, you enforce boundaries without apology, and you engage only when it serves your purpose, not theirs. By transforming your approach from passive niceness to deliberate kindness, you strip them of the very mechanisms they rely on to manipulate you. The critical insight is that niceness is a double-edged sword. It may feel harmless, but in the hands of a narcissist, it becomes a weapon against your own agency. Recognizing this enables you to act with clarity, assertiveness, and restraint, ensuring that your interactions preserve your energy rather than feed theirs. In essence, being nice is not virtuous. Being wise, measured, and self-protective is. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define where you end and another person begins, and with a narcissist, they are nothing short of revolutionary. A narcissist thrives on ambiguity. They manipulate, guilt, and exploit because the rules are always blurred in their favor. When you have no boundaries, every interaction becomes a battleground where they hold all the leverage. Setting boundaries is not a suggestion or a polite request. It is the single most powerful tool you have to reclaim your energy, your autonomy, and your dignity. Boundaries communicate in the simplest terms that your life, your emotions, and your time are not theirs to control. They are not a threat or an attack. They are a declaration of your self-respect. The power of boundaries lies in their clarity and consistency. When a narcissist encounters a boundary, they are confronted with something they cannot manipulate. They cannot guilt, charm, or argue their way past it. For someone used to bending others to their will, this is destabilizing. Boundaries do not require confrontation, they require firmness. Saying no, enforcing rules around your time, refusing to engage in their drama, these are not acts of aggression, but acts of self-preservation. The moment you consistently maintain boundaries, you create a dynamic that shifts the entire relationship. The narcissist can no longer predict your reactions, cannot exploit your emotional resources, and most importantly, cannot treat your life as an extension of their own. Yet, setting boundaries is more than just verbal statements. It is demonstrated through action. If you set a limit on how often they can contact you, you must enforce it. If you declare that certain topics are off limits, you must redirect or disengage when they arise. The narcissist will test, push, and provoke. They always do. But your consistency becomes the framework they cannot break. Over time, boundaries reduce their ability to dominate your life and drain your energy. They force a new kind of interaction, one in which you control the terms, not them. The psychological effect on the narcissist is profound. When you enforce boundaries, you are no longer a compliant participant in their games. You become unpredictable, unexploitable, and independent. For someone who relies on the compliance of others to feel powerful, this is deeply threatening. You don't need to raise your voice, argue endlessly, or prove yourself. The boundary itself is enough to disrupt their control. Ultimately, boundaries are the foundation for every other strategy in dealing with a narcissist. They protect your energy, create space for detachment, and establish the parameters within which interactions can occur safely. Without them, every kind or nice gesture is immediately leveraged against you. With them, every action you take is aligned with your autonomy and self-respect. Boundaries are not a weapon. They are the armor that allows you to navigate the world with clarity, strength, and freedom from manipulation. They are, in essence, the most powerful tool you will ever possess when dealing with someone who thrives on control and exploitation. Silence is one of the most underestimated tools you can wield against a narcissist, yet it is incredibly effective. A narcissist thrives on attention, reaction, and emotional fuel. They are constantly scanning for responses that validate their sense of control. Every word, every explanation, every emotional outburst you provide feeds their ego and reinforces the power dynamic they rely on. When you stop giving them that energy, when you choose silence instead of reaction, the entire dynamic shifts. Silence is not weakness, confusion, or avoidance. It is a deliberate strategy that communicates control without confrontation. It signals that your energy is no longer available for manipulation. And this is profoundly destabilizing for someone who relies on external validation. Selective engagement amplifies this effect. It's not about ignoring them entirely, nor is it about punishing them. It's about choosing when and how to interact on your terms. Every interaction with a narcissist is transactional, and selective engagement ensures that you define the terms of that transaction. You respond only when it serves your purpose, when it aligns with your boundaries, or when it is strategically necessary. By doing this, you strip away the predictability that narcissists depend on. They are no longer able to push you, provoke you, or extract emotional responses at will. You regain the agency they tried to monopolize. The power of silence is also psychological. A narcissist is accustomed to control. They expect that their behavior will elicit a predictable reaction. When you withhold that reaction, you create uncertainty, and uncertainty creates discomfort for them. This discomfort is not just emotional, It forces them to reconsider their assumptions about their influence over you. The more consistent you are in your silence and selective engagement, the more they begin to perceive that their usual strategies no longer work. Their manipulative scripts fail, and for the first time, they may experience a sense of powerlessness in the relationship. Importantly, this strategy is not passive. It is an active form of self-preservation. Silence and selective engagement require discipline, emotional regulation, and clarity of purpose. You must resist the urge to justify, explain, or defend yourself because any response can be leveraged against you. Instead, you respond when it aligns with your goals and you disengage when it does not. In doing so, you maintain control over your time, energy, and emotional state, which are precisely the things a narcissist seeks to dominate. Ultimately, silence and selective engagement are transformative because they invert the power dynamic. Instead of constantly giving energy to someone who exploits it, you reclaim your emotional resources and make the narcissist confront the reality that their influence is no longer absolute. It is not aggression or revenge. It is strategy, consistency, and self-respect in action. The effect is subtle but undeniable. Silence becomes a mirror in which they see that their control is illusory, and selective engagement ensures that you are no longer a participant in their manipulative games. In mastering these tools, you take the first steps toward autonomy and liberation from their influence. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood as coldness or indifference, but when dealing with a narcissist, it is one of the most essential tools for maintaining your well-being. Narcissists thrive on emotional engagement. They feed on your reactions, your frustrations, your guilt, and even your attempts to reason with them. Every emotional response you give them is fuel for their ego and a reinforcement of the manipulative patterns they rely on. Detachment in this context is not about being cruel or uncaring. It is about recognizing that your energy and your emotional stability are too valuable to be consumed by someone who exploits them. It is a form of self-preservation, a conscious choice to protect yourself from the cycles of manipulation that can leave you drained, anxious, and disoriented. Detachment requires a shift in perspective. You stop seeing the narcissist as someone whose approval or understanding matters, and you start viewing interactions as strategic, controlled exchanges. This does not mean ignoring boundaries, denying reality, or suppressing your emotions entirely. It means engaging with clarity and purpose, ensuring that your responses do not give them leverage. By stepping back emotionally, you maintain a sense of control over your own state of mind, which is precisely what narcissists seek to destabilize. The less they can manipulate your feelings, the weaker their grip becomes. The most powerful aspect of emotional detachment is that it changes the dynamic without direct confrontation. Narcissists are accustomed to provoking responses: anger, guilt, explanations, attempts to please them. When these responses are withheld, they are forced to confront the fact that their usual tactics no longer work. This can cause confusion, frustration, or even panic on their part because they rely on predictable emotional reactions to maintain the illusion of power. Your calm, composed, and detached demeanor disrupts their expectations, and for someone who thrives on control, this is profoundly threatening. Detachment also allows you to prioritize your own needs. Narcissists demand constant attention, often disregarding your time, energy, and boundaries. Emotional detachment enables you to step back and focus on your own growth, your own priorities, and your own mental health. It is not an act of malice, but an act of self-respect. You no longer expend energy on someone who cannot reciprocate or respect it. Instead, you redirect it toward activities, relationships, and goals that truly matter to you. Ultimately, emotional detachment is a declaration of autonomy. It communicates, silently but powerfully, that your life and your emotions are yours to govern. You are no longer a participant in their manipulative games, and the less accessible you are to their tactics, the more you reclaim your own power. This detachment does not harm the narcissist. It harms the unhealthy dynamic they depend on. In the long run, it preserves your energy, reinforces your boundaries, and allows you to engage with the world from a place of strength rather than fear or obligation. Emotional detachment, then, is not cruelty. It is the clearest form of self-preservation there is. One of the most common traps when dealing with a narcissist is the compulsion to explain yourself. Every time you justify your actions, clarify your intentions, or provide reasoning for your decisions, you believe you are fostering understanding, building trust, or maintaining peace. In reality, narcissists rarely seek understanding, they seek leverage. Every explanation you give them is a blueprint they can use to manipulate, twist, or undermine you. They don't need context, they need ammunition. The act of explaining yourself may feel rational, responsible, or even moral, but in a relationship with a narcissist, it is often counterproductive and self-sabotaging. Narcissists thrive on control, and control comes from information. Your explanations provide them with insight into your thought processes, your weaknesses, and your motivations. With that knowledge, they can craft narratives, apply pressure, and manipulate situations to their advantage. Even well-intentioned transparency can be weaponized against you. When you explain why you set a boundary, why you chose a particular path, or why you made a decision, you are giving them a roadmap for how to challenge you, guilt you, or bend you back to their will. The more they know, the more they can control. The key realization is that you do not owe a narcissist your internal logic. Your decisions, your boundaries, and your emotions exist for you, not for them. Explaining yourself does not create fairness, it creates opportunity. They will rarely respond with appreciation, understanding, or respect. Instead, they analyze, calculate, and exploit. By withholding explanations, you remove the ammunition they rely on. Silence and firmness become more effective than argument or persuasion. You stop feeding their need to dominate and begin reclaiming your own agency. Stopping the habit of explaining yourself also strengthens your boundaries. When you are no longer compelled to justify every decision, you project confidence and clarity. Your actions are no longer negotiable. They are statements of self-determination. Narcissists are accustomed to others bending under pressure, offering reasons, or justifying themselves endlessly. When you refuse to do this, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer participating in their manipulative games, and your unpredictability in response is a subtle but powerful disruption to their control. This approach requires discipline. It is not about arrogance or aggression. It is about understanding the transactional nature of interactions with a narcissist and refusing to provide resources that empower their manipulation. You engage when it aligns with your goals and disengage when it does not. You act with integrity, not to explain but to assert. You maintain your emotional independence, protect your energy, and ensure that your decisions are guided by your own priorities, not their expectations. Ultimately, stopping the compulsion to explain yourself is a declaration of autonomy. It is a recognition that your life is yours to govern and that a narcissist does not have the right or the need to understand or approve your choices. Every explanation you withhold is a step toward reclaiming control, preserving your energy, and dismantling the manipulative leverage they have relied on for so long. It is not defiance, it is strategy, strength, and self preservation in action. One of the most underestimated ways to counter a narcissist is to invest fully in yourself. While they obsess over controlling, manipulating, and undermining others, your personal growth becomes a silent, unstoppable form of resistance. Narcissists thrive on keeping people off balance, uncertain, and focused on them. They crave attention, validation, and compliance. When you redirect your energy toward your own growth, your ambitions, and your well being, you remove the very fuel that sustains their power. Focusing on yourself is not selfish, it is strategic. It is an act of self liberation that, paradoxically, causes the narcissist the greatest disruption because it cannot be manipulated, argued with, or taken from you. Growth in this context is multidimensional. It includes emotional, mental, professional, and even physical development. Every step you take toward becoming a stronger, more capable, and more confident person reinforces your autonomy. You are no longer reacting to their manipulations or prioritizing their expectations. Instead, you are building momentum in your life that cannot be interrupted by their interference. A narcissist depends on seeing others orbit around them. Your self-directed growth breaks that gravitational pull. You are no longer tethered to their narrative. Every achievement, every new skill, every increment of independence becomes a visible statement that their attempts to control or diminish you are ineffective. The psychological impact on the narcissist is profound. They expect compliance, attention, and emotional availability. And when they encounter someone whose focus is elsewhere, on their own projects, goals, and well being, they are faced with something they cannot dominate. Your growth becomes a mirror in which they see their inability to manipulate you. This invisibly undermines their ego because narcissists define themselves by superiority, control, and comparison. When you are thriving, independent, and emotionally resilient, they are confronted with the uncomfortable truth that their influence is no longer absolute. Focusing on yourself also cultivates resilience and perspective. It reinforces the understanding that your value is not determined by their approval or recognition. It shifts your energy from reactive patterns, trying to appease, explain, or negotiate, to proactive patterns where you control your trajectory. This not only preserves your energy, but also gradually dismantles the toxic cycles that the narcissist relies on. Your achievements, confidence, and self-discipline serve as unspoken but undeniable barriers that prevent them from reclaiming leverage over you. Ultimately, prioritizing your growth is the most subtle and powerful form of resistance. You are not confronting them directly or engaging in conflict. You are simply refusing to be a source of validation, emotional fuel, or manipulation. Your focus on yourself communicates more than words ever could. You are independent, self-sufficient, and untouchable by their control. Growth is quiet, consistent, and unstoppable. It is the ultimate disruption to a narcissist's expectations, and it is the path toward reclaiming your life, your energy, and your freedom. In the end, the strongest weapon against manipulation is not confrontation. It is self-mastery, focus, and relentless personal progress. Assertiveness is one of the most powerful yet understated tools in dealing with a narcissist. It is not aggression, anger, or confrontation. It is the calm, unwavering articulation of your needs, boundaries, and intentions. Narcissists rely on a predictable dynamic in which others accommodate, excuse, or explain themselves endlessly. They expect submission, compliance, and emotional availability on demand. When you practice subtle, consistent assertiveness, you disrupt that dynamic entirely. You communicate without drama or hostility that your life, your energy, and your choices are yours to govern. This subtle form of resistance undermines their sense of control more effectively than overt confrontation ever could. Consistency is key. Narcissists test boundaries repeatedly because they know that any inconsistency can be exploited. If you assert yourself in one situation but back down in another, they will notice immediately and leverage that weakness to regain dominance. Subtle assertiveness requires maintaining a steady, calm demeanor in every interaction. It is the quiet but firm no when a request violates your boundaries, the measured response when they provoke, and the deliberate choice not to over-explain or justify yourself. Over time, this consistent assertiveness creates a predictable pattern that the narcissist cannot manipulate, and it forces them to adjust to a reality in which you are not easily controlled. Subtle assertiveness also sends a clear psychological message. Narcissists are accustomed to eliciting reactions that confirm their superiority and power. When they encounter someone who responds with calm authority instead of submission, they experience a profound disruption in expectation. Your quiet confidence challenges the narrative that they are the center of attention or the ultimate authority. The more consistently you assert yourself, the more they are forced to recalibrate their perception of you, not as someone to manipulate, but as someone who cannot be dominated. This subtle shift in perception gradually erodes their sense of entitlement and superiority. Moreover, subtle assertiveness preserves your energy while dismantling their power. Aggressive confrontation can escalate tension and give them emotional fuel. Passive compliance drains your energy and reinforces their control. Assertiveness, when practiced consistently and calmly, strikes a balance. It protects your boundaries, communicates your agency, and disrupts their manipulation without unnecessary conflict. Each measured action, each controlled response builds an invisible barrier that separates your autonomy from their attempts to dominate you. Ultimately, subtle, consistent assertiveness is a form of empowerment. It communicates that your life is yours, your decisions are non-negotiable, and your emotional resources are protected. It is a strategic, disciplined, and effective way to dismantle the expectations a narcissist has built around you over time. They may attempt to push, test, or provoke, but the combination of subtlety and consistency makes their efforts increasingly ineffective. Over time, the narcissist's reliance on control is weakened, their sense of dominance undermined, and you are left standing with clarity, confidence, and autonomy intact. Subtle assertiveness is not just a tactic, it is the ultimate form of strategic resistance, the quiet force that protects your freedom and asserts your power in a world where manipulation thrives. In the end, dealing with a narcissist is not about confrontation, revenge, or proving a point. It's about reclaiming your life, your energy, and your autonomy. Stop being nice in ways that feed their manipulation. Set firm boundaries, practice emotional detachment, and refuse to explain yourself. Choose silence and selective engagement over unnecessary reaction, and focus relentlessly on your own growth and goals. Assert yourself subtly and consistently, not with anger, but with clarity and calm. Every step you take in protecting your energy, prioritizing yourself, and acting with purpose dismantles their control without a word. The true power lies in your consistency, your self respect, and your refusal to be a source of their fuel. When you do this, you are not just surviving, you are thriving, growing, and demonstrating the ultimate resistance. Niceness is not always virtue. Wisdom, strategy, and self preservation are. This is how you take your power back quietly, effectively, and permanently, leaving the narcissist powerless over a life they once thought they could dominate.